Hey everybody, it's Neil Bortz. I'm in my studio here in Atlanta, Georgia. I want to tell you about the FairTax, okay? $22 million in research behind the FairTax. It is the most thoroughly researched piece of legislation ever placed before the Congress of the United States. And one more thing. Here's the bad thing about the FairTax from the political point of view. It would be the biggest, most massive transfer of power from the government to the people in the history of this country since the Revolutionary War. And that means the FairTax is going to have to be implemented from the ground up. These politicians aren't going to hand you that power. You have to take it from them. And that means you get proactive in the FairTax movement. You want details? You can buy my book. Hey, I give the money away to charity. I'm not greedy. The FairTax book. We have FairTax, the Truth, Answering the Critics. The FairTax. Check it out, folks. It is the way to save our economy and to save our republic. Thanks.
H.R. 25 is the FairTax bill. It was filed in Congress back in January 2009. How is that good for the country?
Well, Paul, in 100 different ways. Let's start listing off how much better the FairTax is than the income tax system. Number one, every single worker in the United States takes home 100% of their paycheck under the FairTax. 100%? If you work for $20 an hour, for every hour you work, you take home $20. Our taxes are not hidden from us. They are not withheld out of our paychecks. You take home your whole paycheck. That's number one. That is a permanent stimulus of our economy. More money in people's pockets means that our economy starts humming again. People have the amount of money they need to satisfy those mortgages, to make the purchases they want, to fund their children's college education, which, by the way, is tax-free under the FairTax. You take home your gross pay, not your net pay. That's number one. That alone is a phenomenal change. Number two, the experts have said when you eliminate the capital gains tax, the marriage penalty, the alternative minimum tax, all personal income taxes, what happens? We become the most favorable tax environment in the world, and the predictions are that somewhere between $10 and $15 trillion with a T will come flowing into our economy from private investment that is now offshore. Now, $10 to $15 trillion dwarfs any kind of stimulus program that our government can initiate. And better, it's private money, Paul. We're not borrowing this money against the earnings of our children and our grandchildren. It makes the American worker one of the most productive workers in the world, again in the catbird seat. It means benefits will come with the jobs. It means growth in the stock market. It means a new era of American economic growth, a boom, will happen after the FairTax happens. That's number two. Those two items alone are phenomenal. It's compelling. Number three, the FairTax eliminates the corruption by Congress and special interest of our tax policy. Every single day, pieces of our tax code are being sold off for either power or profit. $1.5 billion is spent every single year just lobbying the tax code. Big banks? Oh, you betcha, Paul. They've got their lobbyists lined up. There's been a record amount of spending on lobbying with the financial committees and with the tax committees by big banks and financial institutions. Everybody lines up to get a piece, and some studies have said that there is a 22,000% return on lobbying. For every dollar you spend, you're going to get a big benefit out of the tax code. Well, Paul, that's fine, but the average person doesn't have those kind of tax lobbyists. And what it means is that we have to pay more in our taxes to make up for the revenue that's lost every time the Congress makes a little deal with some special interest or powerful player.
Hi, I'm Michael Reagan. You know, with this massive tax system we have today, I have to believe my father would be right out there in front leading the charge for a fair tax. As President of the United States, he changed our tax system, but he's no longer here, and taxes have become absolutely massive. We need a new American tax revolt. It would be led by my father, but he's not here, so I am. So please, follow me and many others as you call this number. And when you call, make sure you sign our petition and sign up to lead a charge against Washington to change the tax system.
Why in the world would our own tax code undermine the growth of our economy and American businesses? It doesn't make any sense until you realize how good the system is for those political insiders in Washington.
Kind of like royalty.
It's a lot like royalty. Here we have, in our nation, began as a tax protest in Boston Harbor, unfair taxation without representation. We rallied around that cry, and yet today we are taxing generations of Americans who have yet to be born. I call that taxation without representation all over again. And at whose hands? At the hands of people who have Americans on bended knee in front of them. I call that a new aristocracy, a new royalty in Washington, D.C. So the very heart of our nation's premise and promise that we would not have taxation without representation, that we threw off the power of royalty and aristocracy, have somehow come back into our system. And what has happened is it's corrupted tax policy to cost every one of us and to undermine our future as a nation.
And the fair tax brings that out into the open.
The fair tax restores the role of the American citizen. How? Every single sales receipt you see is going to have the cost of the federal government on it. It makes every consumer a stakeholder in how our government behaves with our money. It makes it clear that when the government spends money, they're spending our money. And when that awareness happens, we will have new pressure on our elected officials to act responsibly, to stop spending so much of our wealth.
So it brings the power back to the people.
It is the single greatest transfer of power from the federal government to the American citizen since the country was founded. We can pay lower taxes when everybody contributes. Today, illegal immigrants don't pay federal taxes. $1.5 trillion in the underground economy, drug dealers, prostitutes, gamblers. All of the business that goes on under the table is a cash business. They're not a part of the federal tax base. Fat cats who hire lobbyists and tax lawyers, well, they find a pretty good ways out of the tax system too. Under the fair tax, which is based on consumption, when you buy something new at the point of final retail sale, you are paying your federal taxes at the cash register. That means millions of illegal immigrants overnight become American taxpayers as consumers. It doesn't mean a drug dealer is collecting the tax when he sells drugs, but when the drug dealer takes his ill-gotten profits and goes and buys that new speedboat,
he's paying
taxes. The drug dealer is paying taxes. The fat cats, all the loopholes close. There is no more role for tax lobbyists under the fair tax. That means that existing wealth, when spent, becomes part of the tax base. Unlike today, when Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men in the world, to his credit, complained a couple of years ago that his secretary, because she earns a salary, pays a higher tax rate than Warren Buffett on the tens of millions of dollars profit that he sees every year in dividends. Now, how can it be that his salaried secretary pays a higher tax rate than one of the wealthiest men in the world? Because our tax code is unfair.
And it is broken.
And it is broken, and we can fix it.